Good afternoon. Welcome to the SportsMax Zone wherever you are. Jamaica and West Indies opener John Campbell is contemplating an appeal against a 4-year ban from cricket. The ban was handed down last Friday by an independent anti-doping disciplinary panel. The ban relates to a failure or refusal by the 29-year-old to submit to a sample collection after proper notification. That refusal/failure is in breach of Article 2.3 of the anti-doping rules set down by the Jamaica Anti-Doping Commission, JADCO. Now, Campbell was represented at the proceedings by Ayana L. Thomas and Mark Paul Cowan of the law firm Nunez Schofield de Leon and Company. That legal team says it's disappointed with the ruling, and they issued this statement. It says, "We've read the written decision of the disciplinary panel and believe that there are legitimate grounds for an appeal concerning whether the necessary ingredients to sustain the alleged anti-doping rule violation were proved before the panel, particularly as it relates to the notification requirements." Mr. Campbell's position was that he was not properly notified by JADCO. There were several breaches by JADCO of the mandatory international standards for testing and investigations in respect of the notification of the athlete, which in our view were not adequately considered by the panel. Additionally, there were several mitigatory factors supported by evidence which were not challenged by JADCO and which ought to have militated against the imposition of the maximum penalty, even if the panel found that the athlete committed a violation. It does not appear from the written decision that these factors in mitigation were adequately considered by the panel. The statement concludes, "Our client will therefore, at this time, consider exercising his right to appeal after further consultation with his legal team and will make a decision shortly." Now, we were booked to speak with at least one member of Campbell's legal team, but that interview, that confirmation was overturned. They said that there is a clashing engagement, so they're likely to be available to speak with us later this week. But Mariah, we've been watching this case develop. We knew JADCO had the matter, that the panel would sit and it would consider what to do with John Campbell after considering the arguments presented by his attorneys and, of course, a charge laid against him by JADCO, and they have found that his breach warrants a 4-year ban.
Yeah, and George, when this news broke over the weekend, I have to say that, the first thing I thought about is, well, this might be the end of his career. John Campbell is 29 years of age, and of course a ban like this, we know how the sport of cricket goes. Once you're out of the game for some time, of course it's difficult to get back in contention where fitness and all these things is concerned. So the first thing I thought about is, he's 29, 4 years taken away from his career is detrimental. Then I started to think about cricket West Indies on the whole, and the fact that, we've sat on this show time after time and spoken about the need for an opener. John Campbell was one of the players that, of course, he'd always come up for discussion, especially because we have a small pool to select from. So where this is concerned, one, is not a good look for the player, of course, and two, George, it damages the brand of cricket West Indies, because to have one of our players, if this is so, and I'm happy that he's doing the appeal, because it also gives him an opportunity, to attempt to clear his name.
Just before we go further, Mariah, let's look at the record for John Campbell in tests. 20 tests, 40 innings, an aggregate of 888 runs, a highest score of 68, so 1/2 century. Well, 3 half centuries, but 68 the highest score. The average of 26.11, no centuries in Test cricket, 3 half centuries, and a strike rate of 52.17. In ODIs, he's played 6 ODIs for the West Indies, batted 5 times, 248 runs, a highest score of 179, so 1 century for the West Indies in ODI cricket and no half centuries. In T20I, he's played 2 T20s for the Windies, 11 runs in total, and his List A career has, his first-class career, 90 matches, his List A career, 43, and other T20s, 10. So that's the extent of John Campbell's career. As Mariah said, he's 29 years and 29 years old, so he'll be 33 by the time this ban expires. There are some things to consider, though, because if we look back at the statement, Mr. Producer, if you give us the first page for us to examine, the legal team says something, but there are some, based on what the legal team says, there are some conclusions that can be reasonably drawn from what they have said. And it says the first page, thank you. We've read the written decision of the panel and believe that there are legitimate grounds for an appeal concerning whether the necessary ingredients to sustain the alleged anti-doping rule violation were proved, particularly as it relates to the notification requirement. So as expected, the legal team would have launched their defense based on the procedures attendant to how Mr. Campbell was notified and when Mr. Campbell was notified. But if we stick with this page, crucially, Mariah, it says, we believe, we have read and we believe there are legitimate grounds for an appeal. So you said that he will appeal. The statement goes further to say that he's contemplating an appeal. But let's go with you because it is clear that he will appeal. But there is a but. The reason the statement has not said that John Campbell is appealing can only be because of cost. Because if your legal team, who are experts in this matter, have looked at the ruling, of course they were party to the proceedings, and they have come out definitively. Not that the statement could have been, we know the decision of the panel and we will meet with our client to determine the best way forward. It didn't say that. It wasn't as generic as that. It wasn't nebulous at all. It was direct. That we, the legal team, believe, it says here on the first page, that there are legitimate grounds.
Yes.
So clearly, for a team of lawyers advising their client, that advice, already we can see what the legal team would have advised their client to do. We are advising you to appeal. Yeah? We know how this works though, client and lawyer. The client instructs the lawyer to act, and the lawyer so does, or the legal team so does. So it's up to John Campbell now to instruct the lawyer one way or the other. But I've thought about it, and it can only be an issue of cost. So John Campbell is perhaps weighing, if I, based on the weight of evidence, if I pay what is necessary to have this appeal filed and carried through to its natural course, how much will it cost me? And is it worth that cost? You may say yes, because the reputational damage is so heavy.
Correct.
That he would want to appeal. Because in many respects, in the minds of people, if you get a verdict in a case such as this, and you accept the verdict, regardless of the pleadings of your attorney post the event being adjudicated, people say, yes, you are guilty. But sometimes you appeal, and by virtue of appealing, especially when people know that the appeal is expensive, and you go the extent of sparing no expense and appealing, people say, this man, there's something there, because this man would have not have spent so much money pursuing something if he knows that he is guilty.
Yeah.
So in some people's minds, that can be mitigation for John Campbell, and he can win back favor with some people who are now wondering, really? John really did this, trying to refuse to provide a sample? That means he's not guilty. So he'd want to get back into the good books of some people. But for the very fact that the statement hasn't said definitively on this day in sports that John Campbell is appealing, John Campbell is thinking that the cost to file this appeal and to go the extent of the appeal, do I have the resources? Do I want to commit so much resources to something that, based on the original decision, I may very well lose again? So I'll be severely out of pocket, and I'll still have the same decision that I am a cheat and that I should be banned for 4 years.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that reputational aspect, because, George, your reputation is what you live with. Of course, that's what you live and die with, and it's what you'll be remembered by. And if John Campbell is innocent, and of course we have to speculate because we have no clue what really happens behind
Well,
the scenes.
we know, because the panel has said that he's guilty. So we have that to go with. So the verdict is that this is a guilty man. They've met, they've heard what his lawyers have said in mitigation, they've looked at Jadko's charge, they've heard Jadko's pleadings, and they've, in the same tribunal rather, said, based on the weight of evidence, this is a guilty man.
Okay, so my question to you, based on the reputation that Jadko has, where procedures and whatnot are concerned, we've had them on our show time after time, from the highest level to, just those that execute processes and whatnot. Do you think that there might be a mix-up, or there's room for error where this is concerned?
And that's a very good question, because given, as you said, Jadko's reputation and Jadko's some controversies involving Jadko and procedures, maybe people will say, you know what, John, regardless of the expense, if you have to crowdfund your defense, you need to go forward with it. What I will say, not to counter that, but to balance the argument. Jadko is led by an eminent attorney, Alexander Williams. And yes, it is that I don't think Alexander himself worked on the Jadko team prosecuting the case. as you may. But in terms of guiding the preparation of the defense. So when you have an attorney with a strong reputation, you have to give the benefit of the doubt that they know what they were doing. And beyond all of that is the fact of the verdict. An independent panel. So Jadco didn't act as judge and jury in this case.
Right.
It presented a case. An independent panel heard from Jadco. The same independent panel heard from Campbell's defense team. And they found on the side of Jadco that this man is guilty. Mr. Producer, if you go to the section of the statement that concerns the argument raised by Campbell's attorneys about procedure, which feeds into what Mariah was saying, that maybe people say, well, based on Jadco's record, there could be something there that could be exploited on appeal, then maybe we can find something there. And just to refresh the memories of the viewers as to what specifically the legal team of John Campbell said about the procedures, it says, there were several breaches by Jadco of the mandatory international standards for testing and investigations in respect of the notification of the athlete, which in our view were not adequately considered by the panel. So already we have seen the plinth of any defense that, well, any appeal that the lawyers will be instructed to make by John Campbell, because they're going after procedure, as always do. This is standard, but it's still good to look at the letter of what they've said. Yeah. The next page of the graphic, Mr. Producer, offers a little bit more. So it says there were several mitigatory factors. So they're saying supported by evidence. So we gave evidence to support the mitigatory factors, which were not challenged by Jadco. So Jadco admitted that, all right, so let's pick an arbitrary number. If there were 5 points of mitigation that the defense team put forward, they're saying that whatever number we put forward, Jadco did not challenge them. And these ought to have militated against the imposition of the maximum penalties. Even if you found he was guilty, the strength of our mitigation and the fact that Jadco did not challenge what we put down in mitigation meant you should not have gone 4 years. You maybe should have gone 14 months, or you should have gone 12 months, or 20 months, or whatever. But you ought not to have gone the 4 years based on the strength of the mitigation arguments made and the fact that Jadco opted not to contest the points of mitigation we put down. So already we're seeing the appeal take shape. It's just now for John Campbell to press the button and say, okay, the resources are here, go forward. I'm instructing you to file an appeal on my behalf.
Yeah, and do you think, based on what we've discussed today, that he should, or he would?
I would. I certainly would. I would seek to marshal the funds. John Campbell would be able to find a route towards getting the necessary funds to pay for his appeal. An
average number, though, on how much it might cost?
Well, it depends, because what is true, I see where you're going. What is true is that Union Schoolfield de Leon and Company is has one of the most sturdy reputations of all legal firms in this hemisphere, not just in Jamaica. Yeah. So they're very expensive because they're very good. Yeah. So it's not a cheap thing, and appeals are usually very expensive. Well, in some cases more so than the initial trial. So John Campbell will have to find a pretty penny to pursue this appeal. But if I were him, I would. But again, an independent panel, not Jadco itself, has considered Jadco's arguments, considered John Campbell's arguments, and found John Campbell guilty. All right? Break time. Back with more after these.